Welcome to this executive briefing on what is, frankly, one of the most critical and rapidly emerging markets right now, Vietnam's climate tech sector. We're going to distill the absolute key findings from the Invention Lab's latest report to give you the strategic insights you really need to be aware of.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with the big why, the climate imperative that's really driving all of this. Then we'll map out the key players in the ecosystem. After that, we'll follow the money and dig into the investment reality. We'll spotlight a few key sectors that are heating up, and we'll wrap up by looking at Vietnam's path forward.
All right, let's dive right in. Section 1 is all about the why, because, it's so important to grasp that for Vietnam, climate tech isn't just some interesting niche opportunity. It is an absolute economic necessity.
So let's start with a number that really puts everything into perspective. We're talking $523 billion. Now, that's the potential cumulative hit to Vietnam's GDP by 2050, according to the World Bank, if significant action isn't taken. And let's be clear, this isn't just an environmental data point. This is a massive financial risk that puts climate resilience right at the center of any core business strategy in the region.
So you can imagine, with stakes that high, the government has been spurred into some pretty ambitious action. Vietnam has made a national pledge for net zero emissions by 2050. But, a pledge is one thing. What really matters is the capital behind it. And that's where the $15.5 billion Just Energy Transition Partnership comes in. It's this major international initiative specifically designed to accelerate the country's shift to clean energy.
Okay, so we have this massive challenge and we have a major government push. The natural question is, who exactly is responding? Who's on the ground making things happen? Well, that brings us to our next section, where we're going to map out the key players, the 4 interconnected groups that are really the engine of Vietnam's climate tech ecosystem.
So, when we talk about the ecosystem, what do we really mean? Well, think of it as this dynamic system of 4 interlinked groups all collaborating. You've got the enterprises, they're the ones actually creating the solutions. You have the financial providers, who of course are funding everything. Then you've got the intermediaries, think accelerators, who help them grow faster. And finally, the government enablers, who are setting the rules of the game.
Right at the heart of all this, you have the climate tech enterprises themselves. These are your innovators, the ones on the front lines. We're talking about the startups and the established firms that are developing real, tangible solutions. But here's the crucial part. They absolutely cannot succeed in a vacuum. They are deeply dependent on the support of that entire ecosystem.
And this really gives you a sense of the sheer breadth of that innovation. Just take a look at the diversity here. We're not talking about 1 or 2 players. We're seeing dozens of ventures popping up across 6 main sectors. Everything from energy and mobility all the way to food production and the circular economy. It's a really vibrant landscape.
So the big takeaway here, and it's worth repeating, is that these innovators do not operate in a vacuum. They're held up by these 3 crucial support pillars: the financial providers, the intermediaries, and the government enablers. Together, they're providing the capital, the technical support, and the policy frameworks that are absolutely non-negotiable for these enterprises to grow and actually succeed.
And when we talk about that support network, we mean everyone. You've got venture capital, of course, but also international development banks. You got the accelerators and the corporate R&D hubs, and you have the government ministries tying it all together. This whole web of organizations, this is the critical infrastructure that creates the environment for innovation to really take root and flourish.
Okay, so now we have a clear picture of the players. So let's do what any good analyst would do. Let's follow the money. It's time to get into the data and take a hard look at the investment reality on the ground.
So looking at the data, the first thing you see is a clear upward trend, right? Overall, the sector's pulled in about $205 million in funding. But what really jumps out is that massive spike in 2024. It completely dwarfs the previous years. And that spike, well, it tells a really important story about what's actually happening in this market. And that story is all about one single landmark deal. That huge headline number for 2024, it's heavily, and I mean heavily, skewed by one mega round, a $70 million Series A for an agri-tech startup called TechCoop. A huge deal, no question. Now, let's just put that into perspective for a second. That one deal, it accounted for roughly 71% of all climate tech funding in 2024. So while that's obviously fantastic news for TechCoop, it tells us something really crucial about the market as a whole. It shows us that we're still looking at a very highly concentrated, early-stage market where that big, large-scale capital isn't being widely distributed, at least not yet.
And this structural challenge, this concentration of capital, it becomes even more clear when you look at another key metric, the post-seed graduation rate. So for climate tech startups, that rate is sitting at just over 11%. Now compare that to the broader tech sector, which is over 32%. That is a huge gap. It's nearly 3 times lower, and it points to a very real bottleneck when it comes to scaling these companies up. So what's causing this funding gap? Well, it boils down to some pretty tough structural barriers. For one, you've got high capital intensity and really long development cycles, which can be a tough sell for traditional VC models. There's also a heavy reliance on foreign and development-oriented capital, with less participation from local VCs right now. And on top of that, there can be friction around ESG compliance and due diligence. These are the hurdles. So, despite those very real challenges, capital and innovation are converging in some key areas. There's significant momentum in certain sectors, and that's what we want to focus on now. So let's zoom in and spotlight one of the most active areas where things are really happening. A perfect example of this is the energy transition sector. This is an area that's really showing signs of maturation. It's attracting serious capital, about $15.5 million, with a lot of that focused on energy efficiency solutions. But what's really encouraging is that we're seeing investor confidence grow across the board here, not just in one little niche, but across the full spectrum, from generation and efficiency all the way to storage. And you have to ask, what's driving this momentum and energy? A huge part of the answer is policy. Developments like the new law on electricity are, frankly, a game changer. Why? Because by legitimizing things like the Direct Power Purchase Agreement framework, they are creating stable, bankable revenue streams. And when you do that, you essentially unlock the door for private capital to come flooding into the market. Okay, so we've looked at the stakes, the players, the money, and a key sector. So where does all this leave us? For our final section, let's pull back and look at the big picture, the overall trajectory and the path forward for climate tech in Vietnam. You know, if there's one key takeaway, it's this. There is a clear, undeniable sense of momentum building. What the report really finds is that we're past the point of just aspiration. That national ambition is now being transformed into tangible, on-the-ground action. We're moving from high-level goals to concrete projects and partnerships all across the country. And all of this progress really leaves us with the central, forward-looking question. It's the question for every investor, every founder, every policymaker in the space. As the risks continue to mount, but the opportunities start to really crystallize, in what is one of the world's most critical climate hotspots, where will Vietnam's next great climate innovator come from? Now, this has obviously just been a high-level briefing. To really dive deep into these insights, explore all the underlying data, and get the full picture, we absolutely encourage you to download the complete report from the Invention Lab. Thank you for your time.